Hey everyone, and welcome to our channel, where we'll be trying to bring our imagination to life and hopefully inspiring others to do the same. So with that said, let's jump right in. Today we're going to be modeling Anabel. Now, Anabel is a character that I created years ago, and in such he's been through several design changes. The pose we're going to work on today is this one, however we're following this finalized design. So let's see what we can make happen. Now, this is a project that I started 4 or 5 years ago. After building a steel wire frame, I took some polymer clay, built up the base of the body, started carving in a few details here and there, really trying to build it up till I had a figure I was happy with. Yeah, that didn't work out. The more I worked with it, the more I looked at it, the more I began to hate it. The proportions were off, the clay didn't want to work with the steel, it didn't want to stay in place. The whole thing just started infuriating me until I put it on the back burner for a few years. After moving and rediscovering the project, the clay was no longer holding together, so I broke it all apart and started over. This time, I decided to do things a little differently. After getting it cleaned up and down to the steel frame, I decided to bulk it out with aluminum foil instead, thus filling in the body and giving the clay something to hold on to. I also used super sculpey this time, instead of whatever abomination I had beforehand. At this point, you may be wondering, just who is Anabel? Simply put, she's a mercenary. One of an irrefutable strength that matched her Amazonian stature. From a young age, she and her sister became members of the group Black Fox, where they spent many years traveling the lands and fighting for peace, until they eventually became the most unstoppable force in the lands. However, peace never lasts, and one fateful night sent her spiraling into an unexpected journey of revenge. There we go. After a little while of work, you end up with this wonderful little golem who could probably haunt the worst of your nightmares. At this point, I decided it was time for the first bake so I could have a solid structure to work with. I went ahead and carved in some of the finer details such as eyes, nose, bits around the ear. Unfortunately, I managed to lose all of the footage, so you did get to see how much fun these little bits were. So now we'll just start filling in and refining some of these details. I took my Dremel with the small grinder attachment and just slowly started cutting back some of the details, trying to make sure not to take out too much. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to work in all the details on the face. The eyes, the ears, the nose, mouth, earrings, everything. Unfortunately, I wasn't as well paced with a grinder as I thought and ended up having to fill in some details. Thankfully, they make this wondrous stuff called Bacon Bond that allows you to add in on baked clay, which you'll see used extensively throughout this project, like right here where I start working on hands and other details. Alright, here's where things start getting fun. I knew some areas would be difficult to paint once I finished, and I wanted the color to be where it should be throughout the project. So I started using some colored clay to fill in areas like backs of the jacket, undersides of the shirt, hair details. Unfortunately, all of this colored clay is a lot softer than I anticipated, and so I had to make a few pieces over and over until I got what I wanted. I figured out much later that you can just add sculpey clay and knead it in, using the colored clay as a dye to help thicken the material and make it much easier to work with.
I will climb to this, bring you home. This world has stopped, and the breeze is soft. When the time is right, I'll sing you a song. I hold ground.
like I spent forever on the hands, but they were important to the feel of the overall piece, and so I kinda hyper-focused for a little while. But once I finally broke myself away from that, I figured it was time to start adding some details to the rest of the piece. I rolled out little slivers of clay and just started filling in areas, trying to add wrinkles, hems of the shirt, folds of the pants, just really bring a flowing fabric feel to everything. One handy way of making everything feel uniform, looking like it belongs together, removing marks, fingerprints, etc., is to brush the entire piece with clay softener. At the time, I could not find any, however, I did find that mineral oil worked just as well, and once baked, there was no residue or traces left. Before moving on to the details of the pants, I figured now would be a great time to add in her belt, so I could add the belt loops and all the other seams. I just went ahead and rolled out a small sliver of clay, pressed it flat, cutting out a thin strip, and literally just wrapping it around like a belt. I probably could have saved some time here, not worrying too much about the details on the back of the pants, seeing as the entire backside would be covered up by a jacket. but I just couldn't do it. For me personally, it's always the small details that really make a project interesting, and I knew if I didn't, somebody would find that one angle where you could see the smooth backside of the pants. And this is where I will always struggle with videos, because I get so into what I'm doing, I forget that it's supposed to stay in view of the camera. After smoothing out all the wrinkles by giving it another thorough workover with mineral oil, I decided it was time to bake the piece to lock in all those details and make sure I didn't crush anything. At this point, the figure is the most complete it has ever been, and I cannot begin to tell you guys how excited I was just holding this thing in my hand. Oh wait, yes I can. I was so excited about the fact that I never turned on the camera to show how I made these laces. Thankfully I did at least remember before finishing up these buckles. All of these buckles might have been the most tedious things I've ever worked on. It was literally just rolling tiny strands of clay and trying to form them into a buckle and lace them across the strap along with the tongue piece. After this, I moved on to painting the laces because one of the later steps would leave me very limited access to them. Oh hey look, we're back on the hands. Remember when I was talking about hyperfocus? After once again breaking away from the hands, it was time to start filling out the scarf. I rolled out thin sheets of white clay to make this because again, certain areas would be unpaintable once finished. I wanted this to have a very knitted, fabricy look to it, so after looking around, I actually found a large adhesive bandage which made for the perfect texture to press into the clay. After finally getting everything into position and pressed in place, it was time to take care of that massive bald head. I rolled out some bits of brown clay and started forming sections of the hair. This was such a time-consuming process trying to make sure everything's set just right. I would scribe in details for the hair, chunking up bits of the clay, trying to keep a mineral oil on it just to keep everything smooth and in place. And just like that, no more creepy bald lady. It was so fascinating watching this thing come together, just continuously one step closer and closer to the final product. I went ahead and filled in some paint detail on some areas that would soon be covered, and then started cleaning up so I could move on to the next step. After cutting a few more small strips of clay, I went ahead and molded in the cuffs for her gloves. And now for the part I never thought I'd get to work on. I finally get to make her sword. At first, I thought I'd bulk it out with a little bit of foil, give the clay something to hold on to. But in the end, all this did was interfere, and so I changed the plan halfway through. My original plan was to build the sword on a slip system. Once baked, I could remove the support piece and slide it onto the one already on the skeletal structure. Unfortunately, the clay was a little thinner in some areas than I would have liked, and this ended up leading to some damage. However, it all managed to work itself out in the end. After finally getting everything together, I realized the sword was a bit longer than I anticipated, so I had to pull it all back apart and make some adjustments. And there she is. After many years of putting it off and overthinking it and telling myself it would never work, I finally have Anabel. Now, this is not the final product. There's still a lot to do, but unfortunately I've let this video go on far longer than I anticipated. Not surprising given how long it took to make the actual project. So hopefully you'll stay with us, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoyed this, and hopefully we can get the finished project out pretty soon. Thanks everyone, hope to see you again.